Good evening and welcome to Hearts Live, the only programme on telly that brings you the inside track and all the happenings down Gorgie Road. Each Monday and Friday we'll be bringing you the lowdown on all things Hearts. Hearts Live will get you to the heart of the matter, so if you're a Jambo, don't go anywhere for the next 30 minutes. Hearts heroes get cheated out of Europe. The French connection, Rousset on Life at Hearts. And Craig Levine on Life and Times of a Hearts hero. Well, all that to come, but first joining me tonight is Daily Record sports writer Paul Sinclair. He'll give us his views on last night's farce, and we'll hear all about that in a moment. But first, it had been a disappointing night a fortnight ago when Hearts lost at home 1-0 to Real Mallorca. But Hearts' performances since then had been more like the form that they had shown last year. Yet the talking points, sadly, today are not about football, but the antics that happened before the game. Rather than me trying to explain it, let's hear from Hearts Chief Executive Chris Robinson.
What happened was we arrived at the stadium to be told that the match couldn't take place until the dimensions of the goalposts had been corrected. They were illegal. And we were then advised clearly that we were being asked to play on a pitch with goalposts of the wrong size. And we said that's clearly unacceptable. And the delegate said the match wouldn't go ahead. He then tried a variety of measures to see whether any action could be taken to correct the situation. The goalposts had this huge mound of earth in the middle of each of the frames, which meant that the dimension from the ground to the underside of the crossbar was out by, in some cases, 8 to 10 centimetres, which is very significant, and it's in terms of playing football. And eventually, we weren't allowed to play under protest, which is what we said. We must protest that we're playing a game where the rules are broken in advance, and we were told that wasn't allowed. We then played under a protest, and we're clearly there to ensure that there was no trouble in the stadium if a match wasn't going to go ahead with so many spectators in the stadium. But it was a very bizarre and very difficult situation.
It was never Hearts' complaint. It was one that we were informed that the official wasn't happy with. The goals were not of a proper size, and for a club that playing in a European Cup, if it's not up to standard, they should be playing elsewhere. And so we made that known. But I think the delegate was a bit vague in terms of he was wanting the match off, but then we didn't know when was where we played, didn't know if the problem could be sorted in 24 hours, and it was just a bit of mayhem. But the players kept away from it and fully concentrated that if they had to go on, and it wasn't until late, maybe 15-20 minutes before the game, it was confirmed that it was going to go ahead. So they put up a really good performance in a difficult place, 1-0 down, and as I say, just maybe sneaked the one in the last 15 minutes, we would have went through an away goals rule. But they got one chance in the game and they took it, and as I say, we'll just go along with whatever course of action is taken. But I think it would have been, the UEFA delegate had said that if it's his decision, the game was off, and I said, well, you've got to consider a lot of people's paid money here, and they're already in the stadium, and if there's no game goes ahead, you run the risk of trouble. So we played under the match under protest at the fact that the pitch wasn't up to standard by their rules, which has happened before, and there's been decisions taken. But at the same time, you had to think about other factors, and we should never really been put in that position. That decision should have been taken in the morning, or when there was a meeting, and all these things should have been looked at then, and not an hour before the kick-off.
We're looking for justice, and whatever UEFA decide is justice. We're entirely in their hands. There is a precedent where teams have been made to play a game again where the goalposts are the wrong size. So we await that outcome. It's hard for us to say what that will be, but certainly I think we have a very strong ground for complaint about the circumstances last night.
But away from last night's confusion, things became clear on the signing front today when Jim Jeffries identified the striker he'd been searching for, former West Ham man Vincent Guerin.
Be in the right place at the right time. We watched a number of games, and I was down watching, in fact I was down having another look at Samasi Abu, and after 10 minutes a midfield player caught my eye, and I found out the story after the match, and when I realised how you could see that he was a quality player, and it proved to be that. I mean, he's been at Paris Saint-Germain for the last 6 years, played over 30 games for France, and he's a quality player. So he was a number of clubs were showing interest in him. So we just persevered over the last last 3 weeks and managed to get him to Tynecastle. And Gilles and Stefan Adam were a big help to us. And like what he saw, see we were a club making progress, and we're delighted to get him. We've got him to the end of the season, and if things go well, we could possibly have him for another year. But he's turned down a few attractive offers to come here, so we're delighted about that. And he's a good, experienced, quality midfield player who will make us even stronger.
Mr. Jeffries has interest on me, and I know Gilles and Stéphane Adam, French football player, and Mr. Robinson speak French. Is very important for me to speak easy with him.
Although signing Garan has strengthened Jim Jeffries' squad, Neil McCann is now another addition to the ever-growing injury list at Tynecastle.
Huge blow. He's come in last night a bit of pain, and he got home it was about 5 o'clock in the morning when we got back 4 o'clock, and he's got himself to hospital right away and got it x-rayed, and it's found that he's got fracture just above the ankle. So a major blow, not just to Hearts but also to the player himself, because he was starting to maybe last couple get a bit of confidence going, and also for his Scotland chances as well. And as I say, Craig Brown phoned me this morning regarding the situation, so he would have been included in the squad along with Stevie Fulton had their injuries not occurred at this time.
Through their injuries, Neil McCann and Stevie Fulton will miss out on playing in the Scotland squad. But there's good news for two other Hearts men. Craig Brown has once again chosen David Weir to play in the full squad, with Gary Naismith to feature in the under-21s. If any striker were to pull out before the Estonia game, Jim Hamilton could get his call up after Craig Brown put him on standby. Well, good evening, Paul. First of all, welcome to the show. Paul, do you think that Hearts can get this result overturned after last night's escapade?
I think I'd be pretty confident if I was Hearts that yes, there will be a replay. There is the president of Spartak Moscow versus Sion last year in the UEFA Cup, when that match ended 2-each and they found that the Moscow goals were too small. Although the bit about that Hearts won't like was when they replayed the game, Spartak Moscow, the home side won 5-1. So I'll not be wanting that if Mallorca happens. But the indications I hear, and indeed from Mallorca themselves, is that the club's pretty well resigned to the fact that this game will be replayed.
Do you think that's a good thing for Hearts?
I think it is. It's a pity they couldn't replay the game at Tynecastle, because after a one-each draw, whatever the size of the goals away from home, that was pretty good. I still think it'll be a very, very tough task, but they're quite right to appeal. I mean, we're quick enough to slag off facilities in our own country. The idea you go to Spain, supposedly one of the great leagues in Europe, and the goals are the wrong size because the goal line's too bumpy. I mean, that really isn't acceptable, and they're quite right to get the game replayed.
Now let's, Paul, take a look at the goals. We can see the first one here.
Well, very dangerous side, and Lopez standing there unmarked, somebody that they really ought to have been looking after. But it was good, the Hearts could have crumbled after that, but they didn't. They fought back, and Jim Hamilton, who's certainly coming onto a game, that was a great header. For a big guy, he should be winning more balls in the air like that and scoring more goals with his head. That was a cracker. I mean, all the problems, the UEFA problems aside, it was a great result for Hearts, considering that they hadn't conceded a goal all season in Mallorca. Oh yeah, it was a tremendous performance. I think, as Jim Jeffries said as he surveyed his ever-growing treatment room, that the way those guys played on Thursday night, when he gets his top quality players back, he'll have a hell of a lot of competition for places, which is good. So it's good that after a pretty poor start by Hearts standards, they've managed to buckle down, and the players have been brought in and have performed very, very well indeed. Now,
speaking of players being brought in, obviously they've signed Vincent Garan today. Do you think that's a good move for Hearts?
I think he is a quality player. He was getting an awful lot of attention from a whole series of clubs in Japan and in England. But there is a problem this evening. The French Football Federation, who initially banned him for taking drugs for 6 months and then had that ban overturned in the French courts, they have said tonight that they will be appealing again to the French courts and trying to get Guerin to serve another 4 months out of world football, and they say that would apply in Scotland. There's no date for when they will actually go to the court, but it certainly is a blow to Hearts if there's any doubt that the French Football Association could succeed and have them banned.
Okay, Paul, thanks for that for the moment. Well, that's it from the first half of the show, but be sure to join us in the second half when we'll hear from Hearts legend Craig Levein and from Frenchman Gilles Rousset on just how noisy he thinks we all are. See you in a moment.
In France, all the training sessions are much quieter. The players shout a wee bit, but not as same as here. Here it's a big, it's very, very noisy.
Desperately sad to leave Hearts, and it wasn't just leaving Hearts; it was finishing playing football as well. But you know, you say time's a great healer.
Well, Paul and I have had our pies and bovril, so let's kick off the second half. Well, the French connection in Tynecastle continued today with the signing of Vincent Guérin. He completes Jim Jeffries' hat-trick of signings from France, but the new boy has a lot to live up to considering the success of his two fellow countrymen, Adam and Rousset. Gilles has been sensational since he first appeared between the sticks and very quickly won the hearts of the fans. Veronica Cleary spoke to the big Frenchman about life in the capital.
Tynecastle, the old alliance is alive and kicking. Gilles Rousset came to Hearts as a trialist way back in November 1995. The 6'5" Frenchman was the first of Jim Jeffries' continental signings. At the time, he was with Rennes from 1994. He liked what he saw when he first came, despite the fact that it was a bit of a culture shock.
It was very, very bad weather, and plenty of people at training. It was a big shock, but you get used after to do that, because in France all the training sessions are much quieter. The players shout a wee bit, but not as same as here. Here it's a big, it's very, very noisy.
But the quiet and humble Rousset, the noise was something he had to become accustomed to, especially since the Jambo faithful are not the most shy and retiring of crowds. His first day was at Falkirk, the first day that Jim Jeffries and Billy Brown returned to the club after their inevitable departure to breathe life into Hearts and go where their hearts lay.
It was a big, big game for all the Falkirk crowd, and it was very strange because the atmosphere was it was a wee stadium, an old one. And the atmosphere was fantastic, and the pace of the game was unbelievable. And because in France it's quieter, you know, the pace is slow. So it was another big shock.
After that game, Hearts finished bottom of the league. Not the greatest of starts to the Frenchman. After that game, he signed for 8 months and was taken close to the hearts of the fans. Lately he has been out with injury and young Roddy McKenzie has stepped into the #1 shirt. But being the French liberalist that he is, he thinks competition is good.
I think it's good, and it's not pressure for me, because I think competition is part of the game, and the most important is the team. The team is more important than anybody.
In many ways it's been a good year for the Frenchman and indeed the French. For the Frenchman personally, he was part of the now legendary Hearts Scottish Cup winners 1998. There they defeated Rangers and gave Rousset his first major medal in his career at the grand old age of 34. But France seems to be the breeding ground of top quality players, and this year France hosted the most successful World Cup to date and won it. Rousset hopes that this will create something of a renaissance for French football, where the French just might stay in France.
Most of the boys left, you know. They play now in Italy, in England, in Scotland, in Spain, everywhere. And most of the international boys are not playing in France. So I hope it would be a big boost for the young boys, especially to stay in France, to play well with their own team, and after to move. But I think it was a boost, big boost. The season ticket holders in France, in all the clubs in France are growing up, so it's very good.
Lionel Charbonnier, who plays with Rangers, is just another fine example of the quality coming out of France. But Gilles and Lionel, busy with their hectic careers, haven't even had time to go for a bottle of Chardonnay.
I haven't spoken with him since he moved to Rangers because he's busy with his team. I'm busy as well with mine, but I saw, that he's doing very well with Rangers, and I hope it will be as happy as am I here, because I'm very, very happy here.
Well, Paul, the media last year seemed to focus heavily on Gorham and Gold. Do you think that Rousset's up there with them?
I certainly think so. My knowledge of French goalkeepers is not terribly extensive. But if you look at Charbonnier at Ibrox, he was number 3 in the World Cup squad. In that case, Rousset, I don't think, can be terribly far away from the French squad. I think he's every bit as good as Charbonnier on his day. He's a smashing keeper. And I think he's been a great servant to Hearts.
Now, we've got 3 Frenchmen now at Hearts. Well, today we have 3 Frenchmen. Do you think that, French players seem to be coming to Scotland and adjusting very well to the pace of Scottish football, don't they?
Well, I think we'd wait on the Frenchmen at other clubs, but certainly at Tynecastle, without question. It was very interesting that when Guerin was asked why he'd come to Hearts, he said Jim Jeffries had sold the team to him. And then he had spoken to Gilles Rousset and Stéphane Adam and asked them what life was like at Tynecastle and life was like at Edinburgh. And they clearly gave great reports. So the French connection is getting stronger by the day at Tynecastle.
Now, what do you think makes for a successful keeper?
I don't know. I think you need to have consistency and concentration, which he's got. And I think one of the things I think about Gilles Rousset, which I find very impressive, is how he recovers from when he has a bad game. I'm sure he still has nightmares about the 1996 Cup final and that dreadful goal he let in, which turned the game. Now, that could have ruined some players' careers. Always the guy who lost the opportunity for Hearts to win the Cup, but no, Rousset came back, and last season he was a model of consistency, which I think is very good, because I think that is the mark of a great player, how they cope with playing when their form's just not quite there.
Okay, Paul, thanks for that. Well, there can be few who would argue that one guy who played every week for the Hearts jersey was Craig Levein. Craig enjoyed all the highs and the lows that any footballer could hope for with any one club. Hearts Live spoke to Craig about his memories at Tynecastle.
Here we go again.
As Craig Levein surveyed the Hearts Hall of Fame, walls bedecked with heroes of the past, Craig can take comfort in the fact that although his career came to an abrupt end, he is a Hearts hero. Way back in 1984, when Levein signed for Hearts, he did so having been with Cowdenbeath for 3 years, the team he now manages. For Levein, it was to be the beginning of something special.
I think probably when I walked in the door, it was such a friendly place, the people that ran the club, the players, and most importantly supporters, and that's when my sort of love affair with the club began.
His career with Hearts spanned over a decade, with the Fife lad adding impetus to the Hearts' defence. Craig was there in 1986, the year when Hearts had a close shave with victory.
One of the most memorable, I think, was my debut. I played at Ibrox in the middle of the park. Didn't play particularly well, but just the fact that I'd realised that I'd managed to get into the Premier League and play in front of so many people. And obviously my biggest disappointment, I think, must have been the fact that I missed the game up at Dundee in the last game of the season in '86.
Through a series of knee injuries in the season of 95-96, Craig Levein had to prematurely leave football. In an emotional and memorable press conference last year, he gave his decision to quit football, a decision that he found difficult to execute.
Well, I'm hoping to stay in the game. The club have said that they'll look after me until I get something different, and then hopefully I can stay in football. I feel as if I've got a lot of ambitions left, and I want to stay in the game. I was desperately sad to leave Hearts, and it wasn't just leaving Hearts. It was finishing playing football as well. But you know, they say time's a great healer.
On leaving Hearts, Craig expected some time out and thought that maybe it was all over for him. But history has a way of tapping you on the shoulder. With so much football pumping through his veins, Craig couldn't refuse an offer into management. An offer that would take him back to the club where it all began. Management had never even crossed his mind. After all, he was only 32.
No, obviously not. I hoped I had a rough plan in my mind that I would play until I was possibly 35, 36 and make a gradual progression from playing to management or player manager or player coach or whatever, and give myself 2 or 3 years on the management side, playing at the same time to give me an idea of what it was all about. I didn't plan to go right into management at such a young age. I feel as if I had a desire to do something in football, and unfortunately, while I was at Hearts, I didn't manage to fulfil all my ambitions. And it's great that the lads managed to win the cup last year, but that's the sort of thing I would like to have been part of. So I'll just need to try and do it in some other way, and the only other way to be involved in football and to do something like that and be involved in a cup run or a league run or whatever is to go into management.
Well, Craig Levein surely was a true Hearts hero, wasn't he?
Well, he's a tremendous legend at Hearts, and while it was dreadfully disappointing that his career ended at only 32, I think the really disappointing thing was a number of years all the way through his career that Craig missed out because of his knee injury. Because there's no question in my mind he'd have been a Hearts and Scotland great.
Now, his defensive partnerships proved, to be hugely successful with the likes of Mackay and McLaren, didn't they?
Oh, very much so. I mean, and there's another player whose knee injury finished his career.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I seriously think when you look at Hearts and all they went through after '86 and all the rest of it, that if Craig Levein had been there, then I think the ship would have been steadied a bit more as a Heartsman through and through, and such a classy player who never got the chance to develop. And I was at that press conference you showed a clip of. It was a tremendously emotional occasion for everybody there, Jim Jeffries and Chris Robinson as well, and they really realised how much this fella feels for Hearts, I'm sure still, and how much he'd given.
And do you think, briefly, Paul, that spirit is still around at Tynecastle, that people do still feel that way about the club?
Oh, I think very much so. I think that's one of the great strengths of Hearts. It's a great strength of Jim Jeffries. You don't get a bigger jambo than him. And with guys like Gary Locke around, I think he's building a really good squad of people who are very, very committed to the Hearts cause.
Okay, Paul, well, thanks very much for joining me tonight. It's good to have you on
Thanks.
the show. Well, that's just about it tonight from an action-packed show. But don't forget that we